Three, two, one. That was such an important conversation. Understanding the broader dynamics behind these races help us understand what Black women candidates are navigating when they step onto the statewide stage. Now we're going to zoom into the state and hear from someone who has been closely connected to Texas politics for years. Joining us is Dr. Carla Brailey, a fellow at Rice University's Baker's Institute, associate professor of sociology at Texas Southern University, a former candidate for statewide ballot, and the former vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party. She has such a deep insight on not only the national politic, but the political landscape in Texas and what these primary results mean moving forward. Welcome so much, Carla, for your first time here at Sunday Brunch with Higher Heights.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So, for some knows, I spend some time in Houston, and you really have a pulse not only in Houston but also Texas. I had an opportunity to see you on the last day of early vote in Texas while we were scrambling. My brother was voting, and you were, voting. The line was literally out the door. Share a little bit about your involvement in Texas politics over the years and what stood out the most for you on the results of this past Tuesday.
Will do. First, I would like to say after spending time talking to you, I realized that I did not have my ID. So I had to leave and was not able to vote until E-Day, which was very unusual for me. I know the importance just for candidates to have people to vote early. It allows us to know how to move our funding. It allows us to know where we need to go and do some extra stumping to get people out. So I usually don't wait till election day, but I know and respect many of those who do it because it's like a family legacy for them. So, for the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, I have been probably engaged in every element or level of politics in Houston. I've worked with several of our past leaders, that being the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, as well as the late Congressman Sylvester Turner, primarily when he was mayor, and several of the judges, and really all throughout the state of Texas. And so for me, I really just am totally committed to the process of what can we do to turn folks out in the state of Texas. I know we have a nationwide focus, but I truly, truly believe that if we change Texas, we change the nation. And in terms of this particular season, we have so much change, I think, that we have to do. And so, what stood out is that as much as many people had the dialogue, the rhetoric of Black women, stepping out, staying out, we still stood up. We still showed up to the polls like we always do. And we had, in particular this time, we actually had a Black woman on the ballot that had attempted to run a path to victory that touched many places that do not get touched in ordinary elections. And I think that's really important. Just the mere fact that her path that she took, it included urban, but it also included rural, in areas like East Texas and Beaumont and Port Arthur that do not normally, not too often get candidates to really run serious paths through those particular areas. But as we've seen, we have to turn out the urban vote even vastly in much ways that we still haven't yet done in the state of Texas. But we see it was a surge in the state of Texas. It was a surge because we had open seats locally. We had competitive races, even statewide, and not just competitive races, but we had qualified candidates that everyday people knew, and many people had a dog in the fight. And I would say for many of us, I don't want to use the word dog in this context, but dog in a positive sense, that we had Jasmine. And, she ran several studios, small talks, that so many of us were involved in. And I think that it showed us still what Texas can do and what we need to do, and that we still need quite a bit of funding to come through Texas. And I'm speaking as a Democrat and from the Democratic perspective, but we also see that quite a number of voters are still choosing candidates that really do not necessarily represent democracy. I mean, we had people on the ballot that actually had records, criminal records, and so people were still choosing to say yes to that. So I think we have work to do. We still have to talk to a plethora of voters out there, but yet at the same time, black people, black women, they got information, and we've done what we've done for so many years, and we turned out and attempted to turn out not only our families but our communities, our village.
I don't think, I think you would agree, like Jasmine's theory of change was correct, right? This is a state that nationally people have dipped their toe in and out for building like a political infrastructure and investing. She's proven actually a pathway. I would love to hear your vantage point around this narrative, like this quick narrative around she lost. You know, she
I think she
overstepped.
won. Now,
Thank you.
in every race you want to win. When I ran for lieutenant governor, I mean, that was I mean, really, it was a risk. It was a large undertaking. You never have enough infrastructure. Texas, I mean, they say Harris County is the size of Georgia, you all, the state of Georgia. And that's just one county, one city area. I mean, and so just the mere fact that she ran, the mere fact that she was willing to step away from her seat already meant that she was not running on fear. She was running on faith, which we operate in many cases in many different sectors of our lives. The mere fact she ran her own race in her own way, even her commercials were different. And I would tell people, hey, in politics and really in anything in life, we need to be critical because you grow through critiques. You grow through criticism. But I tell people, if you can't do it, you won't do it. Be quiet, sit down, and because somebody is doing it. And we needed that in Texas. Let me tell you, I say hands down, the turnout that we experienced in the state of Texas would not have happened if Jasmine Crockett was not on the ticket. And we can, and I mean that across the board, across race, class, gender. She was willing to fight, is willing to fight. And people are looking for fighters right now. And I think that what she did, she modeled almost a pivot that the Democratic Party has to do. We can no longer, I don't want to say play fair, because yeah, we're in democracy, so we do want to be fair. That's part of our values. But we need to be fair with our pinky on the line. You remember that when you're growing up, like, don't you step on this line. And she was willing to step on the line. She was willing to be different. She was willing for some to say, you know, hey, I know you're not on my team, but in the meantime, if we could at least respect each other while we're in this primary, maybe we can come together and it won't have to take 6-7 weeks to heal in order for us to come together and run as one in the state of Texas. And as much as she's a fighter, as feisty as she can be, I think we can see even in her speech, she acknowledged, let's get to work. Not let's get to work tomorrow, not let's get to work 2 weeks. It was let's get to work. And guess what? Black women heard that, Black community heard that, and we get, once again, information. I do think, you know, and this is a hard one, Glynda, I do think at some point we need to have a conversation with the Democratic establishment. Something has to be done because we cannot have 6 weeks in when you're giving some support. We have to have an infrastructure, not just in the state of Texas, but around the nation. But, you know, for me, I'm in Texas, so I'm going to stick to Texas. Mm-hmm. And we got to have folks who are not scared to deal with Texas. California looked like Texas one time, and I think people forget that. The work that was done, now it's a pretty blue state. I mean, it has some pockets, and we have to be able to invest in Texas. And invest in Texas means that you invest in even Black candidates that are on the ballot.
Yeah. And I would say to remind people, this was the highest turnout in a Democratic primary since 2020, right? Which yes. had a bunch of, you know, different types of ways to vote in 2020. And so the notion that she overstepped, she shouldn't have run. There's a lot of work to be done around narrative building beyond elections and the way people talk about Black women candidates when they lose. She had more votes. They actually both had more votes than the last two primaries. and
Absolutely. It's a
combining.
presidential turnout.
Yeah. And
Definitely.
so reminding people there's obviously a postmortem and what we could have or should have done. There's obviously work and growth to be done, but the notion that we are running towards the possibilities of our leadership is the work that needs to be done. So I would share a little bit. As I mentioned, you were a former statewide candidate. In fact, a Higher Heights endorsed candidate for lieutenant governor. But so share a little bit about, from your personal experience, how people talk about and invest in Black women in general, and then obviously here in Texas.
Glynda, I would like to say I would have a different story, but the investment is difficult. I think it's difficult for Black candidates, but definitely for Black women. And then in Texas, people have to have hope. They have to believe that you can win. That goes back to even when President Obama began to run, excuse me. And people didn't, several people didn't believe he could win. So it's like, well, what do we do? What do we give? And at some point, you have to do like Jasmine. Luckily, Jasmine had raised quite a number of dollars before really taking off. I mean, she had proven that what she was doing, something about what she was doing was working. But you just have to be dedicated to the process. I knew when I ran, it was very difficult, but I also said that we cannot continue to just stay out of these races. The bottom line for us to reach our communities, we don't need the same amount of dollars that some other candidates need who have not engaged our communities. I can walk in some communities and they know me. Why? Because this is not my first rodeo with them. Why? Because when they call me and I can help, I do what I can to do that. And so that always, I think, gives uh, candidates, the upper hand. And so what may cost you $1,200 for a voter, it may only cost, it may cost a lot more. And I give an example. When I got into the race for the lieutenant governor's race, I studied that race. And by that time, I had traveled across the state of Texas several times as vice chair. The candidate that was in the race at the time had ran already twice. He ran, and on the second race, it was a Black gentleman in the race, Michael Cooper, who raised, I don't even know if it was $5,000, but he got within tens of thousands of votes in between. My point, the other gentleman had raised over $1 million. Now, I'm not going to say, Glynda, that you don't need money to run these races, because that would not be smart. And I definitely don't want that to be the sound bite. We know we need funds. But the reality is, when you go to some of these places and you can really, really run this race in the state of Texas, you have the funding, you have the infrastructure, you really can do the turnout that some others have not proven that they can do. And it helps to have competitive races. We had competitive races, and we had candidates of color just about in many of those races, not all of those races. But we can't, let money be the factor that we don't get in this, because when I ran, the talk was, well, can she do it? My response was, no one else has. Why can I? And when they try, they don't get, can they do it? And they close their pockets. They get, can they do it? And they still give them a little something. And my God, what we've been able to do, Black women, with a little something, I'm going to stop there. And so, yeah, we have to run our race, and in hopes that, people get on, I would call the bandwagon. And I just admire Jasmine, because she did it. And, as we all know, she's a total different elected official than who I love dearly, EBJ. They two different styles, two different ways, two different tones, and I just admire her for running her race in spite of.
So, what should we still be paying attention to? I think from two perspectives. Here in Texas, like, what should we be watching? If it was not for a Jasmine Crockett and an increase in turnout, I don't think Colin Allred Rad would be in a runoff. And so there is definitely some conversations around talking about what her increase in the electorate did for down ballot races and other federal races across the state. And I look forward to that, like, making sure we like stand firm in that narrative. But also we shouldn't abandon the state because we've proven some touch points. And so what should we be looking for in Texas?
I think that's a good question. And let me just say this: when James Tellerico got in the race, people did not ask why is he entering the race, and there was already a candidate who happened to be Colin already. Whether you have a critique of him or not, he was still in the race, an established person in the race,
Former
and no one
congressional
asked that
member.
question when Tellerico got
Mm-hmm.
in the race. So I'm sorry, I had to get that out.
Yeah. So there's a
Um,
race, and then you go inter race and gender dynamic.
yeah. So now, great question, and I think this is where organizations, great organizations like Higher Heights come in. We can't stop the work. We have to stay in Texas. Wherever you can, talk to Texans, you talk to Texans. Before the race, within 2 days, we called a meeting, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Glynda. I think I may have sent it to you. Word them off. Hey, we called it Cold Black. We need to get on this call and we need to figure out, is there anything that we could do to continue to push out this vote, and to let people know that we have Black on the ballot. It's on the ballot. If you are in Dallas, it's on the ballot. If you're in Houston, it's on the ballot. If you're in Bexar County, it's on the ballot. If you're in East Texas, it's on the ballot. And I really think that helped morale. And of course, Jasmine Crockett got on the call, and it was wonderful. We cannot stop doing that type of work. I love when Black women win, and we need it in Texas. It's so large, Glynda, that we have to figure out how do we break this state up and identify the paths to win. We know the other party works the local. They work every position is important to them, and I think I hate to say take a strategy out of their book because we already had strategy. I think we need to take another look at what we've been doing, and we cannot stop. We need to be organized so that we are organized and that we can mobilize to move out immediately. We just don't have the privilege of getting in and figuring out, Glynda, like the first 3 weeks is who you need to call. You call Glynda to say, do you have 10 people I can call? No, I think that there needs to be some list out there. I think that there needs to be some calls, whether they're quarterly calls, even if it's just to have conversations like we're doing, even if it's just to highlight what positions are. Let's think about how much money you need to bring in if you run certain kind of elections. We think of things like candidate training, but what can we do to put maybe some informality around training while at the same time building a network, building a base so that I won't have to cold call Glynda to say, will you support me? What is the endorsement process like? And these are the things that organizations like yours who've been doing the work, and you know it nationally, you know it statewide, you know this. What can we do to stay connected in and out of election season, in and out of a campaign season?
365-day engagement. And more importantly, what does this democracy look like in the next 250 years? So thank you, Dr. Carla Brailey, for joining us. Thank you for being a Black woman who leads, and look forward to your continued engagement on Sunday Brunch with Higher Heights.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the work.